My name is David Cooper. I'm pretty excited to do this. I'm going to be talking to y'all today about evaluating Linehaul listings, and I really didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if this would be a show for guys that I usually present to, or if it'd be a show for guys that like really shiny trucks like my son does here. But anyways, we've had a pretty good time walking around here day one and meeting a lot of people and going with it. So before we get started really into anything, I always have to start this off because I've gotten into myself a little bit of trouble before, but wanted to let you know that my company's Linehaul News and Haul Detect Services, we're not endorsed by Federal Express Corporation or FedEx Ground. Furthermore, that we are not sponsored by, approved by, associated with, no connection with Federal Express Corporation nor FedEx Ground or any other carrier whatsoever. Also have to let you know that presentations are intended for educational purposes only, do not replace independent professional judgment, statement, facts, or opinions expressed on those participants individually, and unless expressly stated under the contrary, are not opinion or position of HTS Linehaul News, FLM Marketing Service, or its co-sponsors. HTS Linehaul News and FLM Services does not endorse, approve, assume responsibility for the content, accuracy, or completeness of this information. Sorry about that. My business partner's wife is a high-power attorney. You got to get through all that stuff. A little bit about me. I used to be a FedEx Ground line haul contractor. For those that didn't know, FedEx actually contracts out all of their work across the country. So it's a whole bunch of independent guys that own anywhere from 2 up to 200 trucks. They do cap you at the top end. I've been doing it. Actually, I just got out of doing it. Whole different story. We'll go down another alley. But I've been doing it since 2016. We built it from 4 trucks out in California to about 120 at one time under our management. Had a whole lot of fun doing it, but we figured out a whole bunch of different ways to do it. Because what I learned was everywhere across the country, there was a whole lot of different guys running their businesses in different ways. I'm sure if you talk to everybody out here today, anybody running a business today, we're all facing similar problems, but we're all facing different problems at the same time, right? But what I found was you didn't have to reinvent the wheel. If I could learn from a guy in California that was recruiting the best way, and I could learn a guy from New York that was doing his best practices for fuel economy, actually up in New York, and I could put it all together, I created a pretty profitable business for myself in the middle. So I've now continued and kind of transitioned from doing that to trying to help a lot of other people do it. So we've got a couple different businesses that I work with. One of them is a software company that if you take your FedEx settlement and you spit it into it, it used to take me like 40 hours to do payroll for 160 drivers. And then all of a sudden, poof, it was 15 minutes and my payroll is done. It would also give me like all kinds of analytics on like a per truck basis. We got a services company where I do some consulting work and other stuff. Our big company that are the focus on where I do a whole bunch of this is Linehaul News and Linehaul Summit. If you all are really, really interested in being a FedEx contractor or really a Linehaul contractor at all, check out those 2 companies. If anybody wants, Jake, we hold up our trade pub. If anybody wants a magazine, I've got some magazines that we put out. You all can check them out on linehaulnews.com also. We're also firing up something new that we're calling the Safety Institute. We've had some pretty interesting, one of them's actually sitting in the front row, but if you all want to see some really interesting stuff on safety, you can come talk to Alex up here. But in doing what I'm doing now, I get connected with all these vendors across the place, and it's really important to me to kind of take that safety to the next level. So anytime we're hearing a good idea, we're throwing it forward, and now we're kind of catching the ears of the right people that want to hear these things and want to know about it. So lots going on that. Sorry, now on to the real important topic, I guess, is Linehaul and evaluating Linehaul runs. What makes a little bit difference, or I guess is what we'll describe as Linehaul, in my opinion, it's tractor trailers moving freight from one location to another of the customer. No-touch freight most of the time. That's what Linehaul is in my world. I know there's a whole lot of other people out there, but for this show, it's Linehaul. If you're familiar with FedEx, it's not the pickup and delivery. I don't know anything about that. I actually, at our safety stand-up, these guys probably heard last week, I thought it was hilarious. The Linehaul manager down there goes, I can't even spell P&D, but gets kick. Yeah. There are similar contractor models out there. You'll see several actually in this room where a lot of guys do owner ops, some people do fleet owners, but a lot of them have a very similar contract to what FedEx runs. FedEx just happens to be the biggest because they got a whole lot of trucks doing it and they've been doing it the longest. The differences are kind of interesting to me in that I think a lot of them are trying to learn from this, and I think, in my personal opinion, FedEx is kind of the safest because they have made it the most thorough contract, and it's very deep, and it's 90-something pages long. But anyways, it protects them more so as a carrier than I think it does you, but it also keeps all parties to where you know it's not going to blow up, and it makes things pretty nice. The biggest thing that makes FedEx different than the general trucking world, and I run trucks too around here where we get paid net 30, net 60, net 90. FedEx is net 7. And actually it's really less than that because it's like whatever you get paid the next week. So whatever you run Saturday morning through Friday night, you're getting paid the next Friday. And for cash flow wise, that is pretty slick. What really makes FedEx different than the rest of these is that it's an open market for these. The run assignments, your positions with FedEx Ground can be bought and sold, and not necessarily with a whole stock sale of a business, but you can do it as a single purchase of a lane. And we've seen them go for as cheap as a couple $1,000 to as much as $300,000 to $400,000. It's really interesting when you find out that FedEx actually gives these things away. So there's ways to get these, and there's ways to become a contractor without putting up that big money. You really have to take a look at, is it worth it even at that point in time? I tell people that all the time whenever they bring me listings, when they bring me these things. And if you want to know where, I guess, to find one of these businesses, Biz Buy Sell is the most common place for them. You'll see them listed on Craigslist. I've seen them listed on Facebook Marketplace, but a lot of them on Biz Buy Sell is where it's at. You all will see listings all around the place. But you can buy either a single run or you can do a stock sale of it. What we typically see in a listing, in my opinion, is a lot of BS. I think it's probably the truth of most anybody doing a sale is at the end of the day, they're trying to sell and they're trying to get the most money for their business. I make my money with one of the companies of kind of breaking down these listings and figuring out where they're lying. We do due diligence packages where we will break them all apart. But let's go through what we typically see with these. Usually it is just big numbers at the top. Big asking price. It's usually more than a full year's worth of revenue. And you'll see cash flow numbers, or you'll see it as a multiple of EBITDA. The first time I did this exact presentation, I had a guy kind of laugh in the crowd as I was saying this, and I asked him why he was chuckling, and he said, well, depending on who's asking, my EBITDA is one of four things. Is it the IRS asking? Is it my wife asking? Is it the bank asking? Is it my business guys asking, right? And so he can make his numbers look however he wants to make his numbers look. So it got real scary to me when people are looking to make millions of dollars investments and they're going off of what somebody else is saying their bottom line is, and they don't really have a way to back it up or prove it. So we started digging into that and started figuring that out. But most of your listings will just show those high-end top numbers, and they won't get into the nitty-gritty, into the details of it. The one to really look out for, especially if we get back into an economy where fuel starts growing again, but I really saw this kind of when this was made, but this presentation's about a year old now, but from like 20 to 21 to 22, right? I ran, when I was a contractor, I ran the exact same number of miles with FedEx for those 3 years. 20, we skyrocketed, but 21 and 22, it was just flat. My gross revenue went up 20% year over year. Fuel went up 20% year over year, right? So top line growth doesn't mean anything. Whenever we look at these businesses and we start breaking them down, we try to take fuel out of it to make it compare apples to apples. But if anybody's going off of the gross revenue number on one of these contractor models as a way to base their numbers, you really better pay attention to what they're doing on the fuel side, because there'd be a lot of money that could either be lost or gained right there with that. But that's what we see in those listings. I think in the better listings that you see out there, and there are some brokers that, in my opinion, are doing things the right way. For those familiar with the FedEx side, brokers get a pretty bad rap in our space and have for a while, but I think that's probably true in any business listing, right? I'm sure there's real estate brokers that can slap stuff, on the drywall and put lipstick on a pig and make things look pretty. It happened really bad in the FedEx space a few years ago, but it's really getting cleaned up. And the reason is a lot of times a lot of the buyers now are trying to be smart with their purchases, and they're financing the purchases, so banks are taking big looks at these things and getting into it. What I love about this listing here, and this is a real one, it's a few years old, but there's plenty of these that are doing it now. They are getting, they both are showing third-party books being done in them, and what they also have is they're SBA pre-qualified. So anytime I feel like, and trust me, I've looked through a lot of these listings out there on Biz Buy Sell or wherever they're at, if they are marketed as being pre-approved through a lender, there is a very, very good chance that they are being very, very honest with their numbers. And so I love seeing that in the listing. I love seeing a lot of things about this run. And if you're looking for these things, the difference, and we'll get into it, but the difference between dedicated and non-dedicated is a big thing. Sorry, I'm skipping too fast. Can I go back with this clicker instead of going forward? Oh, I'm clicking the wrong button. Sorry. Where are we at? Oh, so where it all comes down to this, and what you really have to watch out for, is making sure what you're buying is truly what you're buying. This has kind of been the shadiness that we've seen lately, so please be careful if you are looking at these things. Is get multiple forms of the settlements from the seller. Don't just trust their numbers. It's kind of crazy to see, but these things trade, like I said, at very high numbers, multiple millions of dollars for these businesses. A lot of times they do go SBA, but we've seen sellers where they won't give the different types of settlements. So the settlements, when you download them as a contractor, you can get a PDF, you can get an Excel sheet, you can get a CSV file. If you've got a CSV file, you can throw it to either my company or you can throw it to one of the other companies, and they can throw it in their system and they can tell you if it's legit or not. Right? If you get the CSVs and the PDFs, then you can really tell back and forth of whether the numbers you're looking at or not. But please, buyer beware, because it's kind of actually funny, but Haldy Tech, the first time this was about 6 months ago, the first time we uploaded settlements to it, it literally crashed the software. Because the software didn't know how to handle a faked number, and it just didn't know what to do, and it threw so many error codes in the background that it crashed the software. They've now since made it to where it just throws red flags, and I get emails. If anybody uploads a settlement now into Haldy Tech software and it is a duplicated trip number or looks like a fraudulent trip or anything like that, it's just poof, red flags, and a whole bunch of us get an email from it. But we see it a lot. We offer our software out there free for anybody to use for a merger or acquisition. We create M&A accounts, and it's kind of crazy how often we're seeing it now. It's certain areas of the country or certain listings that are out there, but you see it a lot. So please, buyer beware with this. Obviously, what could go wrong? Somebody could be lying to you the whole time. But the biggest thing with this is you're making usually at least $1 million, but a multi-million-dollar investment, and it's not like buying a shopping center or it's not like buying an office building or something like that. There's no insurance on it, right? It could be gone tomorrow for a multitude of reasons. Some could be your fault. Some are not your fault, right? But it really could go away. I actually was looking around here because there are some insurance companies now that will offer you, one of their representatives was here, but the guy that I need to talk to wasn't. But there are some insurance companies that you could actually get insurance on these routes. They'll do it up to about what I consider probably 80 cents on the dollar, but they will insure the route for you if it is a dedicated one. But there's a couple different reasons you can lose these things. I had a good buddy that was a FedEx contractor that he covered an area of Pennsylvania for years where they had the USPS contract. And then all of a sudden they lose the USPS contract and they cut it out, and he went from running 15 trucks dedicated every single day, about 600 miles a day per tractor, to zero. Big hit overnight, right? Several $1 million operation, just poof, gone. And they made it up to him, but it took 6 months or so for him to do it. And so you are protected from it, I say, on that side, but not completely. That's when this guy's a gold medal, high toppest of the tier contractor, and so they worked with him to get him that revenue back. But I've seen other guys where if it's a safety problem, especially if it's a performance issue, runs are gone, right? There's certain thresholds. Each of the contracts have them. The different contractor models, some are more lenient than others. Really depends on how busy freight is, in my honest opinion, if you want to know how truthfully harsh they are or how stick to the word they catch on it. But the biggest thing is to realize is that the runs could disappear overnight. So if you're going to look into these things, you got to make sure that the area you're getting into, it's going to be there for a while. If you all want to know about the typical numbers on these slides show it. They are a little bit on the old side. The numbers have gone up, but also the expenses have gone up. And at the end of the day, the percentages are about the same. FedEx now, and I don't want to get right into their details, and that's why I leave it a little bit older, but they are paying a little bit more per mile than what this shows. But this is probably 20, you may know, this is probably 2023 data on the rates. So didn't want to get anything too personal, but the biggest thing to look at are the numbers on these. I don't think these percentages are too far of a lie as what you're making on that, but these percentages, again, are percentages of trip revenue. If you can look at it and kind of some things I said to keep track of the fuel, you're paid by the mile of fuel. So you're reimbursed by the mile on it, right? So they do a calculation for the fleet, and they say the fleet gets X miles per gallon. If you do better than that, you can make a whole lot of money. If you do worse than that, you can lose a whole lot of money. So whenever you're looking into these things, I think it's like finding the diamond in a rough. If you find a company that's for sale for a decent price that looks like they're making money, but they're losing their tail on fuel, because it knows, to me, I can come in and I can replace the tractors, or I can make my changes and bring my fleet into the mix. And if I take the fuel economy from 6.2 up to 8.7, 8.8 that we accomplish running this freight that we're running, you can put a whole lot of extra into your pocket at the end of the day. So again, I saw some eyeballs whenever I said 8.8 on fuel economy. My top truck was 11.1. That was on a run from Savannah, Georgia to Loxley, Alabama. Ran the flattest of flat ground all the time. Had a lift axle on a Volvo with a buck 89 gears. Literally, the Volvo reps told me the truck wouldn't work, and I got 11.2 miles per gallon. Now, when I went to sell that truck, nobody wanted it. Like, I had to give it back to the dealer, and they didn't hardly give me anything for it because nobody wants that tractor, like, out here, right? Nobody wants that gear ratio. Really, not a lot of people want the lift axle. It's like, it is a very specific truck for the model, but fuel economy is the name of the game in this side. So that's where we went with it. Actually, I would guess it was a little bit ahead of myself. Is wrong trucks, fuel kills them. That is what our software shows for the most easily replaced, or most easy place to make money in these businesses is to increase your fuel economy. I think that's across the board with this, but it's especially true when you're reimbursed the way that most of these contracts reimburse. And so to get into the nitty gritty of it, right now with FedEx, you're reimbursed at 7 miles per gallon. And you're reimbursed based on a purchase price of Opus, because they get you fuel at cost everywhere across the country with their fuel cards. So if you're spending more than that anywhere, you're automatically losing money. Or if you are not obtaining at least 6.92 miles per gallon, you're losing money. But if you can find a fuel program where you can get fuel cheaper than that, really tough to do, but there are out there. Or if you can find tractors, and this is the easy part, but you can find tractors and drivers that can do much better than that. If you're doing 100,000 miles a week, which isn't hard to obtain with teams running with FedEx, it's about $400,000 in your pocket every mile per gallon you increase for the year. So it's serious dollars to do that. It's the number one place where we see it all the time. It's where I've been a big fan of Mack Volvo for a long time. I think they've gotten great fuel economy for me. You don't see a lot of these chromed out, what I call truckers trucks in the FedEx fleets, because you can't get the fuel economy that we can get. During COVID, we were almost forced, I guess you could say, to buy a couple W990s because it was literally the only trucks we could find. And we lost our tail running with FedEx, and we couldn't figure out why. It was before I had the software. It was before any really of this knowledge came around to me, and it was, hey, we got these pretty trucks. All of our drivers loved them. They were the easiest trucks to staff. We had the most miles coming from them. They were running teams and running like 6,800 miles a week, and we were losing money on them because we weren't getting a good enough fuel economy. They got like 5.9 miles per gallon. When we went to sell them during the height of like the used truck market, that was awesome because we had really low mileage W990s because we were parking them whenever we could because we were losing our tail on them, and we made our money back in a heartbeat selling those. So that's the thing too, is with this is the asset utilization. You'll see a lot of times on those bad listings or the poor listings, in my opinion, where they will list the numbers based on a pro forma, and it won't be on what a business truly has done in the past. And then if you come into that thinking that you're going to run whatever your contract says you're going to run every single week. I mean, does anybody out here in the crowd have a truck that never breaks down? Does anybody have a driver that never calls off sick? I wish I did. Like, right? Everybody always asks me about autonomous trucks, and when I think of that coming, I'm like, yes, bring them on. I don't have to hire anymore. No, I'm just kidding. It kind of scares me. But debt burden's the last one, where I see people screw up a lot when you buy these businesses is they know their numbers. They do the numbers of the business, but they don't calculate in that they just took on a loan, right? I got a whole bunch of SBA lenders that if you want to buy one of these things, I can hook you up. I can get you prime plus one, but you better factor in that prime plus one into your or into your schedule whenever you're doing this, because it'll get you if not. And I've seen a lot of guys fail. The biggest place I've actually seen guys fail, and I just buyer beware on this, and this is, again, my opinion, please consult with your own, but when guys buy these routes and they go the SBA way and they include all of the equipment and everything into the note, and then all of a sudden it's 4 years later and you've put an extra 400,000 or 500,000 miles on that truck and you need to replace it, but you still have 6 years of payments because the equipment's looped into your 10-year SBA note, and you're so far upside down on it you can't get rid of it. And I've got 3 or 4 clients that are in that exact boat. So please, I do think that it is smart to purchase these routes with SBA, the routes themselves, but I think you need to go traditional financing on the equipment where your loan matches the life of the equipment that way, because I've seen a lot of guys get in trouble with that kind of towards the end. Not right, they'll buy these businesses and for 2-3 years cash flow's booming, everything's great, and then all of a sudden they got to replace trucks and they can't afford to because they're still paying on the trucks they got, right? In my opinion, that the thing I say to all these times is that the numbers have to make sense, but the routes should be making sense, like cents per mile. These aren't big margin games, in my opinion. This is trip revenue per mile. I know that maybe right now you look like a genius. I've said this for a while too, that as a FedEx contractor, I feel you're either a genius or an idiot. When freight markets are booming, right? When the freight's up and the freight's high, when my man here's getting paid $9 a mile for moving some pretty crazy stuff, you look like an idiot as a contractor, right? You're getting paid $1.85, $1.90. When freight tanks and the load boards aren't doing anything for you, you look pretty smart, in my opinion, as a contractor, because you're getting paid that same rate you were, and it's every single week, right? It is very predictable, in my opinion. Now, there are flows, there are ups and downs throughout the year, but year over year, it's pretty predictable compared to the majority of the trucking world or the area I've been in and the outside of it. Kind of the interesting part, right? I feel like most people that are getting into this business, they're not going to trust me. They're probably not going to trust themselves. They're going to ask accountants. They're going to ask everything else of, hey, how do you evaluate these things, right? And they're going to be able to come up with a number based on that. I think there's a whole lot of value to, especially these contractor models business, in understanding what the contract really means and the different parts about it, right? And so when you're looking at these freights, it's really crucial, especially in the FedEx world, but in the side, to know where you're going to be. So I say location, location, location. The first location on this Schedule A is where the tractor is domiciled. I've seen now freight flows kind of all across the country with the software that we have, where I got access to and can see where things go and moving up and down. And there are areas where you are absolutely booming right now. If you're in the FedEx world, there are certain markets, and it's like that for the entire freight world, right? Savannah, Georgia is booming when it comes to everything. But Savannah's really booming in the FedEx world. They've opened up 4 or 5 hubs down there, and it's just absolutely blows up. So that's a hot area for the market. It's also the most expensive area to probably buy runs in right now. But any of the port cities are blowing up. There's also these weird pockets across the middle of the country where in their network they have these regional sort facilities. So like Kodak, Tennessee, middle of nowhere, eastern Tennessee, it's a huge market right now. A ton of trailers moving in and through there because they have a fully automated, no package handlers, anything like that, but it's a fully automated facility. A lot of people have seen probably in the news lately about the Network 2.0, and I don't want to get into the true details about that, but if you can find yourself in the middle of one of these new buildings where they have integrated both express and ground on the FedEx side especially, or if you get into really any of the new buildings that have the new sort centers and the new facilities, that's the future of it, right? So when you're looking to buy one of these businesses or looking into it, I tell people all the time, stay away from the old hubs. Don't get into the older buildings because freight's moving away from those, right? And I've been in buildings in Columbus, Ohio, which is one of the original 3, and then in the most recent, equal size building that's up in Lehigh, Pennsylvania. And it's like 6 miles of conveyor belts to go from one end to the other, which seems like crazy, but right, it's a building this size that's moving packages like crazy. There's 180 doors on 4 different wings each way. You all have been in these centers. In Columbus, Ohio, it takes like 6 hours from a package to get to one end to the other, and in Lehigh, it's like 18 minutes. So if I'm buying a business and I'm looking into these markets of where I want to be or where I don't want to be, I want to be where packages are moving quick, where they're filling trailers up like crazy, where there's a lot of volume. Where it gets real interesting, in my opinion, is if you can find the certain buildings that do the large packages. It kind of made big news in the past when several years now, but whenever FedEx dropped Amazon and they went kind of their own route, and everybody thought they were crazy for just saying no to them, right? They were the number one shipper in the world, and they said, nope, sorry, we don't want you. What they did is they went to everybody shipping big packages and said, we'll take you. And the home delivery guys absolutely hate it. We hear them complain all the time about delivering tires and delivering beds and delivering whatever. There's a whole lot of furniture that went through where I sold my company out of. Wayfair's a big customers of theirs, and I absolutely loved it because the average count of packages in the trailers that I was pulling was like 300. Versus when we were up in Lehigh, Pennsylvania, where there's a whole lot of USPS and a whole lot of mail stuff being pulled by them, it was like 90,000 packages in a 53-foot trailer. So the time to load those things up, like I love being in these buildings where it's the large package buildings and they move, it's only 40, 50 doors on the building, but they'll move 300 to 400 trailers a day. And they only need a couple contractors in there because most of the time these big ones, they're taking it from the big building and they're getting it to the next hub that's close by, right? It's a port. It's Savannah to Atlanta. It's Norfolk, Virginia into Charlotte, but it's those short turns. But if you're the guy that's there, you can turn and burn and you can do a lot of it. So that's the next thing is where's it going, right? That's my second location on here is the run destination. I think that's crucial. There's a lot of the inbound versus outbound markets, so it's do you want to go into the high density populations? I think a lot of times you have to figure out what you're pulling as a contractor. If you're looking at these businesses to buy, it can be difficult to find these things out, but if you really zero in and look at the settlements, there's ways to figure out the exact freight. If you go in and you take the time to go interview and talk with the personnel that are at the hub buildings, you can figure out what types of freight they're pulling, and then you can figure out, is it a home commodity, is it tires, is it, whatever's going on, but then you want to figure out where that market's going. And I've had lanes dry up on me when I'm going to Anniston, Alabama. Sorry if anybody in the crowd's from Anniston, Alabama, but that used to be a big FedEx center, and then all of a sudden it dried up. And I was going there empty, and I was coming back loaded because there was a big Chewy dog food facility where they were making dog food like crazy down there. There's tires down there. There was some stuff going on. But then all of a sudden there was a fire at the Chewy center down there in Anniston, and my lane was toast. It was done because they were no longer producing dog food in Anniston, Alabama, and there was no reason for FedEx to send a trailer down there. So poof, gone overnight. If that would have been in a different scenario where I would have been taking loaded freight down, right? Chewy's got big places in Ocala. They got big places kind of all over the place. But if I would have been going to a heavily populated area that's an inbound market, a Florida market, I would have still been going and I would have kept my lane because I would have been loaded there, loaded back, right? And they would keep me running if I were still loaded there, even if I were empty coming back. But I had a lane where I was empty down, loaded back, and when the loaded came back on, they're definitely not sending me empty both ways. So looking into these things and getting into the nitty-gritty of where they're going and what they're doing, to me, that dissolves the volatility of these runs, of how likely they are to disappear or how far they are to go away. The third location that I have marked on here, it would be, and I actually didn't mark it out, but it would be the run number. So when you're in these hubs, when you get into the different buildings, there are multiple lanes, right? Multiple trucks going to the same position each night, but they have run numbers. So like in Savannah, when I just got out, I had like the 1, 3, and 4 lanes to Atlanta and back each night. Well, there's up to probably 20, 25 lanes that go from Savannah to Atlanta each night. If freight dies down, which ones do you think they're taking off first? Right? They're not starting with number 1, the guy that's been there, that opened the hub, that's been there the longest. They're starting at 25 and dropping their way that way. So if you're buying these things and you're looking into it, it kind of scares me if you're going, from the middle of nowhere to the middle of nowhere and you're lane number 4. That's the first one on the chopping block, in my opinion. So that's some of the insider stuff of look out to if you get your hands on one of these Schedule A's. Again, I probably didn't go into enough detail for that. For those that don't know, the Schedule A is the run assignment from FedEx. It is the biggest part of your contract, in my opinion, but it tells you, hey, this is where your trucks are, this is where they're going, and this is what they do. There are some things called unassigned runs, unassigned run rotation with FedEx. They still have value. It's a little bit more difficult with this. So with an unassigned run, really you've only got the two locations. You've got the where they're domiciled, and you have the run position. That really doesn't even matter because it's supposed to be a true wheel to where it goes through and it changes each week. But using that and using the Schedule A, I like to figure out, and really it's one of my things that I try to do, of how easy these businesses are to run. I take the software, and if this company is supposed to go from, if it's supposed to go from Savannah to Atlanta and back, and it's supposed to do that with these 3 tractors, and it says that it should do it Monday through Friday. Well, that should be 15 trips to Savannah, Atlanta, and back, right? I want to know how often does this guy have 3 trucks that go to Savannah, Atlanta, and back? Because he could be making more money, a contractor could be making more money if he's going from Savannah to Atlanta up to Marietta and back, and the profit and everything will look better, but that's an extra phone call that the guy has to make. And what if that truck's dispatching out at 2 a.m. each night? Do you want to have to answer the phone call at 2 a.m. each night and say, hey, this is how we go? So figuring out that consistency and that pattern of how often the trucks run exactly to the whatever the schedule is, in my opinion, that is the greatest factor for how smooth the operation goes and how easy it is. A lot of these listings, you'll see them where they say absentee owner and all that stuff. I was an absentee owner for several years. I was off starting this business up that I'm doing now. I was doing a lot of other things that I wasn't running my truck. I was an absentee owner because we have an office of 22 people that run all the trucks we were running. Right? The people that come in and say they're an absentee owner and they've only got 4 or 5 trucks and they don't do anything and the business runs itself, I would believe them if their Schedule A consistency is north of 90%. If it's anything south of that, and I would say the average that we see is probably about 75, 80, if it's anything south of 90, they're making multiple phone calls a week to keep their business operating. Somebody is, right? The business is not on autopilot, but that's the way to predict it. I can also tell you that in my opinion that the more often the tractors run to what the schedule says it should run, those are the safer routes. So if you're worried about buying these things and poof, they disappear the next day, the ones that do the same thing consistently week in, week out, those are the ones that we've seen that are kind of around and they're here to stay. Equipment, we talked about a little bit about this earlier, and I was really hitting on the fuel economy the most time, but a lot of times you get wrapped into buying whatever equipment these guys have whenever you're looking at it. And I've seen where a lot can go wrong with it. They think that it's lightweight freight. They think that's one thing or another, and they kind of go into this blind. But at the end of the day, you really need to make sure that the equipment you have for these routes are the right ones. I was ignorant when I started this thing. We bought some trucks off of Ritchie Brothers because it was all we could afford, and they were completely wrong gear ratios, everything else. It wasn't what we needed to be pulling FedEx trailers. But I was young and dumb and didn't know any better, and honestly, it was the only thing that we can afford. But we ate through it, and we got through it. I've seen businesses sell with those types of trucks, right? I've seen guys where they have just gone out and they want to take their own fleet and continue doing something else, and so they'll just literally go out and buy a whole new section of trucks, and they'll say, oh, we just replaced the fleet, and they put this on it, but they're going and buying used trucks at auction, and they don't have any history on it. Buyer beware. And I know I make this out. It's most guys that most of the listings that you come across in this space are pretty good, but there are a lot of businesses in this space that I feel like that get out there that just aren't what you're looking for, and it's a lot is hidden behind the curtains of it. So we always say to get all the full repair history of everything. I think you can learn a lot about a truck from its repair history and decide if it's one that you're going to keep around and keep moving in your fleet for a while, or if you're going to get rid of it. And it also tells you a lot about the owner and about the routes you're buying. Right? If you're going to a guy to buy his trucking operation and you want to buy a business, he's saying, yep, it's a well-oiled machine, this, that, or the other, and you say, great, can I have all your repair history? And he can't provide it. How well of an oiled machine does he have if he can't even prove that he's been oiling his machine? Right? And so it's just figuring out those little things, and it's trying to get through that. The right trucks with the right specs, again, this is super, super lightweight freight in most cases. I mentioned chewy dog food. Every now and then you will get the canned dog food, and it can be super heavyweight. You really got to know what you're pulling on that. Kind of a weird story, but we used to get pulled over every single night in Virginia being overweight, pulling canned dog food from Chewy. Now, every single night. The other one was Oregon back in like 2018, 2019, put a high fructose corn syrup tax on all of their drinks. And so people started going to Walmart.com to order drinks, order Cokes. And we were taking crazy amount of Cokes into Oregon. The law has gone out since then. But we were getting pulled over for being overweight going into Oregon too. Outside of those two instances, it's like 25,000 pounds on an average, but most time like the Chewy kind of offset that, so it's like 13 to 15,000 pounds per load. So having trucks that are spec'd up to pull that really makes an impact. It's kind of dying, and I think I kind of laughed as I got the Make Linehaul or Make Trucking Wealthy Again hats. But the Carb 27, we'll see if it actually gets thrown in there or not. We've been preparing for that for a very long time. We made big changes with our fleet before we sold. At one point in time, it looked like it was going to be a huge impact for the entire industry, and now it just kind of keeps getting delayed. So we'll see what goes with that, but I had that on that slide. I do think it's still something to be impact. What I would really look for whenever you're buying these businesses, though, is make sure the trucks you have are going to be compliant with the contract for the future, because a lot of times these trucks get grandfathered in for so long, but then things change. Like the forward collision avoidance mechanisms or the automatic braking that are on the trucks. There were a lot of guys that I saw that bought businesses, and then going back to the SBA thing, but they bought these businesses, they had trucks that weren't compliant for it, and then when they went to activate them with FedEx, FedEx told them that, hey, you just bought a truck, and sorry, we're not activating it for you because it doesn't have the right safety equipment on it. So make sure that all the trucks have that. A lot of times it's the automatic braking, the side collision warning, and a lot of even the lane departure warnings are it's coming pretty prevalent too. I think that that's going to be standard within probably the next 2 years. And so if you're looking at buying these trucks and you're going to wrap them up into long financing, make sure that you are making sure that the fleet will, I guess, be able to stay compliant throughout your life of the loan on that, just because we don't want to see you go upside down. Biggest thing that I think to be aware of with these businesses whenever you buy, and I know I'm trying to probably scaring you off more than I'm promoting you to buy them, but turnover can be big, right? You come in and you buy. I've seen a guy that the other day that he bought 27 tractors, and I kept asking him, and I was helping him kind of through the purchase process of this, but I kept asking him if he had spoken with the drivers, right? You're getting ready to take over this company. You got 32 drivers that are on a payroll record. Have you spoken with the drivers yet? And he said, no, the current owner's scared that if I talk to the drivers, they'll all quit. So you're willing to buy a business for over $5 million that has 32 employees, and you don't know if those 32 employees are going to show up to work your first day in operation? That would scare me, right? But we see it happen a lot. And so it's pretty interesting in this, but I always have felt that if an owner is not willing to divulge, I get it, right? But when you get to a certain point with these, make sure that you're talking to the employees and really look at the employee records on this. We have found that there are guys that will fluff up and just staff all of their operations or staff all of their seats right before the point of sale, and you'll find where they're paying like absolutely astronomical rates. These are a couple years old, but I would still say this is probably pretty accurate. I know I got a buddy that runs out in the Mountain West, and he said that he just upped his. He just got to 60 cents, but he still has some driver on payroll that are at like 58. Chicago, I know is definitely probably higher than this. Pacific Northwest, it kind of blew me away, but teams out there, I think that a lot of it was that FedEx got a bad rap, but it was really hard for guys to hire teams out there, and I know several guys paying over $1 a mile for team drivers out there. I don't know how you can make money under one of these contracts. You all saw earlier where you make like $1.85. If you're giving 3/4 of that to your drivers, how are you making any money? So buyer beware of where you're going with these runs and knowing it. Now, there's plenty of guys that will, and I was one of them, right? I own trucks in Savannah, but my teams lived in Arkansas, or my teams lived in Louisiana, because that's where I could hire drivers, and I could hire drivers for less. And so that made it work for me, but the solo operations, it won't work out that way. You have to have the drivers that are there locally and doing it. So know what it's going into, and make sure that the payroll you see on there is matching what payroll should be, right? Because if they've fluffed up and they're paying astronomical rates, and it's guys have only been on staff for a month, we've seen that often way too much. And so that's where I really like to see and look at the longevity of those employees. These are this is the safety results summary that you get from FedEx. This one's a pretty FedEx specific topic on this one. But these will, I think, tell you the most of the culture and the compliance of the company on that side of it. They give you full reports and will tell how many miles the trucks have run month over month and the change in those. It gives you detailed reports on all of the safety. Sorry, I hit the wrong button again. But detailed reports on everything that went wrong, whether it was a roadside stop, whether it's an accident, whether it's somebody, literally, I got written up for a guy running off the road and into the grass at the yard. It got written up on my safety report that I tore up the sod at the FedEx facility. But it literally tells you everything about these companies. And so if you can't get your hands on one of these, I would not buy a business. They aren't the easiest for contractors to get. They have to be sent out from the hub managers. But this is like the lifeline of the safety department of any of these companies. And so please make sure that you take a look at these and figure out what's going on inside the business. I always love and like to see about it is that it shows you exactly what driver was having the problem. And so if you're getting ready to inherit a whole bunch of drivers and you've seen the same guy that's been pulled over 4 or 5 times for speeding or for having reckless driving or third lane or whatever it may be, you know right away who your problem child are on day one. So there's a lot of info into that can do it. I also like to see the looking at the month over month of the mileage. You can see a lot of times the longevity of the company just at a quick snapshot, right? It'll tell you miles per month for the last 12 months. So you can see if there's been any ups or downs or if, what's been going on with that. Management for these businesses, I think that's where being a contractor for a lot of these companies is a little bit easier than running your own fleet. I know it is because I run my own fleet also. But most of the time, management expenses, I think, for these businesses come in around 10% of trip revenue. That, again, total revenue, if you're throwing fuel in there, it'd be about 6 or 7%. But that's going to be all of your office and everything. And where I think a lot of guys probably cheat themselves is where they don't consider what they're paying themselves if they're running their own business, if they're a 7-truck, 8-truck operation and they're doing their own thing. It's where they don't put their salary for themselves in there. And they'll make the numbers look better on a business at the end of the day. And so if you're not planning on doing everything that the current owner is doing, you better put some money in there for one of these because you're going to have to find somebody else that does it. The AOs is the authorized officer, but say the owner of the company and their responsibilities, right? There are different licensing and different features, but you all know what it takes to run a trucking company. I always say that FedEx is like trucking light. So they take care of a lot of the compliance side when it comes to the legalities of it if you want them to. They will take care of a lot of the driver files and the maintenance and record keeping and all of that kind of stuff for your equipment if you want them to. They take care of a lot of that stuff, but you still have the responsibilities on your side. I think mostly it comes down to you're more of like the dispatcher and below or maybe like the fleet planner and below, and they take care of a lot of the higher stuff, but then you, for a day-to-day operation side. There are several vendors out there in the space now that can take a lot of it off of you where they can really make these turnkey and make it to where it's a business that anybody can do from anywhere in the country. Because there's vendors out there that'll do the recruiting or they'll do the dispatching, they'll do the maintenance side of it. They'll handle any side of your business that you need them to because a lot of the investors that are getting into this space is more so they're just business-minded people that are getting into it. It's the days of the trucker owning trucking companies in FedEx or in these management companies, I see it going away because just the cost of doing business with it. And it really comes down to is when most of these businesses are being sold as 8 to 10 truck operations, it's a big money game now to play into it. And that's where this whole management side is being overlooked, in my opinion, that if you are that investor, you have to replace what that owner is doing. And I'm telling you, they're full of it. If they're saying they're a complete absentee owner, they're either doing it themselves and they're very, very good at doing it, or they've got a team behind them that's being offset somewhere. I think that you see it a lot where these guys, they don't have it, and they're the ones that they're always kind of working in their business, and they don't consider that as, paying it. But you need to be a boss, and you need to be working on your business with it. We just see it all the time in these businesses where there's too much going on. I say that these are a 24/7 business. My youngest can tell you that I've already bored him enough today, but he's been bored around me numerous times when I've been on the phone. I've coached third being on the phone with FedEx Ground before. He's shaking his head, yes, I love it. But, right, there's certain times when they call and you got to take the phone call, you got to do it. So if you're saying that you're paying nothing, but you're the guy giving up coaching your son because you're the one taking phone calls all night long, you're giving up something. It's got a lifestyle impact to it. These businesses are tough. They take a lot to operate, take a lot to manage. That is FedEx in a nutshell, in my opinion, of if you're buying and selling, of what you need to look out for. There are several, what will I say? There's several different listings out there, or styles out there for where you can find these and how you can do these things. And I think it's always crucial to make sure that you are doing your due diligence, you are doing your deep dive, and you're really looking into what you are truly buying and not just looking at what the listing is on it. People always say, what are these things worth at the end of the day? I always say they're worth what somebody's willing to pay, right? I think that I got somewhere around 6X for my business, and most people will say that these businesses trade for 3 to 4X. But I sold a very well-oiled machine, very well-running operation, and my brother just did the same thing. I think that we had different businesses than most. I think that we were very honest with our numbers, and we said that our EBITDA was what our EBITDA was, or that our cash flow matched our EBITDA, which a lot of people don't because they'll throw the depreciation card into it. And when you're throwing depreciation in and then selling on a multiple of depreciation, you can get into all kinds of problems. So it truly is, these routes are worth what somebody is willing to pay for them. But what we have found is that there are people across the country that are willing to pay a whole lot more than probably what I would. So it's really tough to say what they are. The equipment is the easy side, right? Anybody can value a truck. There are plenty of guys out here that'll value trucks for you, but you're truly valuing a business. The key is to know what you are buying at the end of the day. So please conduct thorough business analysis, understand what a healthy P&L should like in these, collect data from anywhere you can collect data from. Know your risk potentials. Know it's a 24/7 gig. Try to use the past to predict the future. I always say that's a good one. And remember that location, location, location. So that is about all I've got. If you all want to hear more about being a line haul contractor in any way, shape, or form, I do have a big show coming up next month. We are in Dallas, Texas. If you all sign that, it'll take you to a sign up for it. You can use codes. I should have put them on here, but you can use the code HTS free and get yourselves a ticket for you since you all listened through this for me. Does anyone have any questions before I do break about anything come line haul? All right. Well, thank you all so much for your time, and I hope you all appreciate or enjoy the rest of Matt's.